Welcome to Climb Stories, where every setback becomes a setup for a greater comeback, and where the world's most iconic successes begin with moments of doubt, rejection, and resilience. Today's story isn't just about technology, it's about vision. It's about a man who was fired from the very company he created, only to return years later and transform it into the most valuable brand on Earth. This is the story of Steve Jobs, the man who taught the world that innovation isn't about adding more. It's about stripping away everything that doesn't matter. It's a journey through obsession, failure, rebellion, and redemption. A story that reminds us that sometimes, to climb higher, you first have to fall. So let's dive into one of the most legendary comeback stories in business history. Apple. Steve Jobs' visionary comeback and design revolution. It's 1976 in Los Altos, California. The world is on the edge of a digital revolution, and in a small, cluttered garage, two young men, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, are building something extraordinary. They weren't trying to create a company at first. They were trying to create freedom. Freedom from the rules, the suits, and the system. Jobs was the dreamer, the marketer, the perfectionist. Wozniak was the technical genius, the quiet engineer who could turn imagination into reality. Together, they built the Apple I, a wooden box with circuits and wires that didn't look like much, but it was the beginning of something monumental. Jobs sold his Volkswagen van, and Wozniak sold his calculator to fund their dream. With that money, they founded Apple Computer Inc. in Jobs' parents' garage. Jobs had one goal: to bring computing power into the hands of ordinary people. He believed technology shouldn't be intimidating. It should be beautiful, human, and accessible. The Apple II was their first major hit. It didn't just perform, it inspired. Schools, hobbyists, and small businesses began adopting it. By the age of 25, Steve Jobs was a millionaire. Apple went public, and the world saw him as a rising star, the face of a new era. But fame and fortune weren't enough. Jobs didn't just want Apple to succeed. He wanted to revolutionize everything, and that obsession would soon cost him everything he built. By the early 1980s, Apple had grown fast. Jobs launched the Macintosh, a computer that introduced the world to the graphical user interface, icons, and a mouse. It was revolutionary but expensive. Jobs believed so deeply in his vision that he ignored the skeptics. He demanded perfection from everyone around him: designers, engineers, marketers. His intensity inspired some and alienated others. He was known for his reality distortion field, the ability to make people believe the impossible could be done. But that same intensity created tension inside Apple. Sales of the Macintosh didn't meet expectations. The board and CEO John Sculley, the man Jobs had personally hired from Pepsi, began to lose confidence in him. In 1985, after a series of power struggles, Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he co-founded. It was devastating. One day he was leading a multi-million-dollar empire. The next, he was out, unwanted, humiliated, and lost. But instead of giving up, Jobs turned his pain into fuel. He later said, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. It was time to climb again, this time from the bottom." Most people would have walked away, but not Steve. He founded a new company called Next, focused on creating powerful computers for education and business. The Next computer was elegant, futuristic, but it was too expensive. It didn't sell well, and critics called it a failure. But what most didn't see was that Next was a laboratory for ideas, a place where Steve refined his philosophy of design, technology, and purpose. At the same time, he made another bold move. He bought a small computer graphics company from George Lucas for $10 million. That company? Pixar. Jobs invested not just money, but belief. Pixar was struggling, but Jobs saw potential. Years later, Pixar would release Toy Story, the world's first fully computer-animated film. It became a global phenomenon. Pixar's success made Steve Jobs a billionaire again, but his heart still belonged to Apple. By the mid-1990s, Apple was in trouble. The company had lost its identity, its vision. Sales were falling, and innovation had stalled. Apple needed saving, and the man they had once fired was the only one who could do it. In 1997, Apple made a desperate move. They acquired Next for $429 million, not just for the technology, but to bring Steve Jobs back home. The man they once dismissed now walked back into the company's headquarters. Older, wiser, but still burning with the same relentless drive. Apple was weeks away from bankruptcy. The product lineup was confusing, morale was low, and competitors like Microsoft had taken over the world. Jobs immediately began cutting unnecessary products, simplifying the lineup, and focusing the company around one clear mission: build the best products in the world. He famously said, "Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things." Jobs reintroduced the sense of design, emotion, and purpose that Apple had lost. In 1998, he unveiled the iMac, colorful, transparent, and unlike anything else on the market. The iMac wasn't just a computer, it was a statement. Technology could be friendly, beautiful, and personal. The world noticed. Apple made a profit again for the first time in years. But Jobs was just getting started. Steve Jobs believed Apple wasn't just selling products, it was selling a philosophy. He launched the Think Different campaign, a tribute to rebels, misfits, and visionaries. The ad said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." And that line became Apple's identity and Jobs' personal mantra. Over the next decade, Apple would redefine entire industries, not once, but multiple times. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a small white device that could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. It didn't just change how we listen to music. It changed the music industry itself. Then came the iTunes Store, which revolutionized digital media. In 2007, Jobs walked on stage at Macworld and said, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." He revealed the iPhone, a sleek device that combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator. It was elegant, simple, and ahead of its time. The audience gasped. Competitors mocked it at first, but within a few years the iPhone would reshape the world. It wasn't just a product, it was a cultural revolution. Then came the App Store, MacBook Air, and iPad, each one pushing the boundaries of design and functionality. Apple was no longer just a tech company. It was a symbol of creativity, simplicity, and innovation. And Steve Jobs was at the center of it all, leading not through consensus, but through conviction. What made Jobs different wasn't just his products. It was his philosophy. He believed design wasn't how something looked, but how it worked. He pushed for minimalism, removing clutter until only perfection remained. He obsessed over every curve, every pixel, every sound. He once said, "Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple." Inside Apple, he was demanding, sometimes harsh, but always focused. His passion drove his teams to deliver the impossible. And behind that intensity was a deep sense of purpose. Jobs believed Apple was building tools for the mind, devices that could empower creativity and change the world. He saw technology as art. The circuit board was his canvas. The device was his sculpture. Under his leadership, Apple became not just a company, it became a movement. In 2003, Steve Jobs was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. He refused to accept it. For years, he tried alternative treatments before finally undergoing surgery. Even in illness, he kept working. He appeared at product launches thinner and weaker, but his spirit remained unbroken. He knew his time was limited, and that made his mission even more urgent. He told graduates at Stanford in 2005, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make big choices in life. Because almost everything, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure just falls away in the face of death. That speech became one of the most inspiring in history. A message about living with purpose and following your heart. Jobs continued to lead Apple through his illness, overseeing products like the iPad, iPhone 4, and MacBook Air. Each launch was a testament to his unwavering vision. But by 2011, his health had deteriorated. On August 24th, he resigned as CEO, saying, "I have always said that if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know." Unfortunately, that day has come. Just weeks later, on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned not just the loss of a man, but the loss of a visionary who changed how we live, think, and create. Today, Apple is one of the most valuable companies in the world, worth over $2 trillion. Its influence is everywhere, in your pocket, on your wrist, in your home. But more than the products, Steve Jobs left behind a mindset. He taught us that perfection isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things beautifully. He taught us that simplicity is power, that failure isn't the end, it's part of the journey. That passion, not money, drives true innovation, and that one person, with enough courage, creativity, and belief, can change the world. Jobs' story is a reminder that greatness often comes after rejection, that success is born from obsession, and that vision is the bridge between the impossible and the inevitable. From a garage in California to the heights of global dominance, the story of Steve Jobs is not just a story of technology. It's a story of resilience, rebellion, and relentless pursuit of excellence. He was far from perfect. He was demanding, impatient, and sometimes ruthless. But his drive, his taste, and his unshakable belief in human creativity reshaped our world. Jobs once said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why even be here?" And that's exactly what he did. So if you're standing at the bottom of your climb, doubting yourself, facing rejection, or feeling stuck, remember Steve Jobs. Remember that even the man who built Apple was once fired, once broke, once lost. Your failures don't define you. Your comebacks do. Because the climb isn't about reaching the top. It's about having the courage to start again when you fall. Here at Climb Stories, we celebrate those who dared to think different, who turned obstacles into opportunities, and who kept climbing when the world told them to stop. If this story inspired you, if you believe your next big comeback is just one step away, then make sure to subscribe to Climb Stories, where we bring you tales of grit, growth, and greatness every week. Because no matter how high the mountain, every climb begins with a single, bold step.